What's up, lab rats? So I was talking to a client that we train who's one of our master's athletes, and she is an equestrian. So that means she rides horseback. It's like a fancy word for riding horseback. But she competes, and it's one of those sports that you don't appreciate until you really get a solid understanding, or not even a solid understanding, a rudimentary understanding of what it takes to make it look as easy as it does. I know when I started training Virtue and Moyer, the figure skaters, some of the hockey guys would be like, oh, that's not that hard. It's like, it's so hard, and they just, the skill is they make it look easy. And it's a lot like how Carey Price plays goal. So that's what got me thinking about it. It's like, when you see a good equestrian, because so this client who's an equestrian, she's also a sport physiotherapist. So it's very cool because she has that understanding and background. So she gave me some articles to read, a chapter from a book to read about how it's dressage that she does. So how the rider and the horse kind of interface, and then she gave me some videos to watch of world champions just to see how they do it and how it compares to a rider at a lower level. But the best in the world, they make it look very easy. It looks like they're doing nothing, and so that's what got me thinking about Carey Price, how it looks really, like he knows where the puck's going to go, and he can just effortlessly get there. So then when I was reading this chapter on the equestrian, or on dressage, it was talking about how the pelvis of the rider kind of communicates with the spine and the limbs of the horse. So that's how they communicate. Myself, I've been on a horse once in my life, and someone else was riding it, and I was on the horse too. I was a little kid. But, I would have thought that, you squeeze with your knees and you poke at it with your thing and you pull on the reins. But no, apparently that's not what you do. It's very subtle movements of your pelvis that kind of tell the horse where to go. Which got me thinking back to Carey. And I made this connection when I was talking to Thomas Magnuson at the Network Goaltending Symposium. There was somebody was giving a talk, and they were talking about Carey, and they showed him on the horse, and it kind of clicked, because I remembered, oh yeah, he probably doesn't do it now. He's probably not allowed to, but he's ridden rodeo. So he has, and I went back and looked at some pictures of him riding rodeo, and even the horse is turning, but he's not, holding on, or his knees aren't squeezing. He's got that control. And what we're really talking about is an awareness of where your pelvis is in space, how to control it. For him, for any goalie, it's maintaining neutral pelvis. So that's what we're going to chat about today. And don't kind of glaze over and be like, oh, that's not jumping up on a 6-foot tall box. This is a critical thing. So a lot of you go around with an anterior pelvic tilt. So let me aim you down a little bit. I've got the sketchiest setup today, but you go around with the anterior pelvic tilt, and some of you think like your butt sticks out the back, and you think, man, I got that big hockey player's butt. But it's not at all. It's the fact that your pelvis, which should be here, is dumped forward. So a lot of you are tight in the front of the hips, I know that, and it pulls your pelvis forward. So those tight hip flexors, and part of it is your position, that you're always flexed at the hips. Part of it is a lot of you are in school or at work and you're sitting all the time. So those muscles get chronically shortened. So they get chronically shortened, they pull your pelvis forward, and here you are. But here's the problem. My hip flexion is relative to so this is hip flexion. My hip flexion is relative to my pelvic position. So my pelvis is dumped forward. That's all the hip flexion I have. Is that enough hip flexion? So basically my femur, my thigh bone, is smashing into the front of my hip joint, is smashing into the front of my acetabulum. Now when you look at that range, it's like if I were in my butterfly, is that giving me enough range to actually recover recover my skate underneath me? Probably not. So let me just tilt you down again. Sorry to be messing with you there, but yeah. So if we're here and our pelvis is dipped forward, it's also probably going to have you sitting your bum back in the net a little bit, which you don't really want to do. But let's just say my pelvis is forward and then I need to recover. I might only be able to get to here before I run out of room in the front of my hip. So, or I might have to get out here a little bit more to get that clearance. I can't get straight, like right up here, to get a nice powerful position, or the most efficient position, I should say. Or I can, but I would have to kind of lean back with my torso to get that position. So I think you can see how it decreases your efficiency in the net, and it's not something that you would be like, oh, I can't lift my leg. You know, it's like your body's going to find a way to compensate, either by setting that foot out a little bit, which is a less efficient position, or by rocking your body back a little bit to make that clearance, which again, you're not maintaining your good solid position. So, but the other thing that you might not realize is the impact of just, you know, bumping the femur off the front edge of your acetabulum as you try to get that range of motion and run out of room, you know, over time. And some of you were born with these beautiful goaltender's hips and they let you do everything, and you've got a wide butterfly flare and you can do the splits and it's great. This might not be as important to you or have as big an impact for you, but some of you were born with hips that can barely tolerate the demands of being a goalie. So, you know, all our hips aren't the same. We have little intricacies, just like a baseball pitcher's shoulders, they're not all the same. Some guys can make it through their career, but they have to be so careful with their shoulder, and they, you know, kind of barely make it through a long career. Some guys can't. Some don't even make it out of high school, you know, as a pitcher, because it isn't meant to be. And then some guys have a long Major League Baseball career, and, you know, without major trouble. So, you know, you got to know where you fit and where you want your wear and tear to come from. So that can be a problem, especially if you don't have that perfect, pristine goalie's hips. This over time, you know, if I you know, wear shoes that rub on my heel over and over again, what do I develop? I develop a callus. And the same thing will happen if I'm hitting, I'll develop a callus. But in this case, it would probably be a bony callus, which maybe you had a little impingement that wasn't a problem, but over time you're going to make it bigger and bigger and bigger, and then it will be a problem. So what's the answer, and how does this relate to Carey Price? Because we just want to talk about Carey. I think he had such a good awareness of pelvic control and maintaining pelvic neutral, even dynamically. So even when he's moving, he can keep that good control. I don't know if he can even get it in a position where he knows it's going to improve his range of motion on pushes. Just, I don't think consciously, but maybe reflexively from, you know, doing rodeo and being a goalie. But for you, what we want is to establish neutral pelvis. So there are 3 landmarks we're going to find. This is my audiovisual aid. So this is my pelvis, like right there. And so these little bony prominences are called your ASIS. You like that, did you? Yeah. Are called your ASIS. So we're going to find those in a second. We're going to lie on the floor. I'm going to lie on the floor. You can do whatever you want. So that's your ASIS. And this is your pubic symphysis. I said pubic, so you can chuckle a little. This is your pubic symphysis. So those are our landmarks, ASIS and your pubic symphysis. So we are going to lie on the floor. Again, I'm trying to rig a jig. My little jobby. My jobber here. I hope you can see me, but. So we're gonna lie on the floor with our knees bent, our feet flat. We're gonna put our thumbs on our ASIS and our index fingers on our symphysis pubis, or pubic symphysis. And then we're going to rotate to get those points level. So that if this was a bowl, the bowl would be holding the water level. So I want you to start with your knees bent. And that might actually, you might have to anteriorly pelvic tilt a little bit from there, because with our knees bent, we're putting slack in our hip flexors. But I just wanted to show you the difference. So first we're gonna find that neutral, and there will be a little arch underneath your back. Your low back won't be pushed into the ground. And then what you're gonna do is extend your legs and then see where that triangle is. So for most of you, it'll probably be tipped this way a little bit, and you'll have to kind of use your abdominals to just kind of pull it back underneath to get those landmarks level again. So that is your neutral pelvis position. So notice how you have a small arch in your low back. This is nice and level, and that's where you're going to start. So kind of pay attention to if you just lay down, when you first lay down, did you have a bigger arch, and did you have to use your abdominals a little bit to pull it underneath? So then the next thing would be trying to find that neutral pelvis position when you're in tall kneeling, so a little bit more of a functional position. So again, just getting on your landmarks. Maybe don't do this in the gym because someone might call the police, but just getting on those landmarks and tilting just your pelvis to, again, make them nice and level. Now, if you get them level and you're like this, you're not using your pelvis, you're using your whole torso. So get tall in your torso and then tilt that pelvis to find where those are all lined up and level. For me, that's about it. And I actually feel like I'm tucking my bum underneath me a little bit to get in that position. So that would be the next step, to get it in a kneeling position. And then your goal would be to do some movements, just some random movements, and come back and see, okay, and don't try to correct it after you've done that. Come back and say, well, where am I? I can feel, I don't know if you can see it, but I'm tilted again, like really tilted again. So here I'm going to correct it, pull it back to neutral, okay? And do a couple movements, but trying to focus on keeping it. Hey, way better, okay? So that's something you can do in your off ice, just to practice, because it won't feel natural. What you normally do, which for most of you is anterior pelvic tilt, is what's going to feel natural. So it's going to take quite a bit of time and deliberate practice to actually find and use that on the ice. But when you do, and I think it was helpful for me to hold my hands there because I could feel if I was losing it. But when you do go through those drills, feel also how much more freedom you have in your hips as you do that. The final stage would be, finding that position in standing, and then again, being able to do, some agility drills, even some squat drop and jump, and then checking again to see if you're in that position. Now, I know when you're in your ready position, you're not just standing up tall. This is still kind of a neutral pelvis relative to my spine. I'm not rounding my back or arching my back. I'm rotating forward from my pelvis, so it's almost pelvis on femur rotation. That's okay. I'm not saying that in this position, you should be tucked under to try and get that flat. It's a little bit of a different thing. So I just wanted to make that distinction that, it's not always straight up and down. It's just finding that nice neutral position in different functional patterns. Was there anything else I wanted to say? I don't think so. Let's see. No, I think that's it. Instagram peeps, thanks for joining in. You guys get to see this live and then it's gone, or maybe it lingers for 24 hours. Up here, I've got it on Facebook. I'm going to post it in the Goalie Training Lab, which is the private Facebook group we have, but it's free and anyone can join as long as you're a goalie and not a jerk. So if you want to see it later on, that's where to go, Facebook Goalie Training Lab. Next week we will be running another contest to give away another Goalie Training Pro snapback that are getting snapped up like crazy. But I think that's what I had for neutral pelvis and Carey Price. So think about it. It makes sense. And get in touch with your pelvis a little, would you? See you. It's Maria from goalietrainingpro.com. Cheers.